Educators, I think we need to look at the curriculum. So what is it we're teaching? Do we have representations of all diverse populations in our classrooms? That's everything: race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, uh, unique abilities. All of that need to be presented in a classroom. Students need to see themselves.
Welcome back. If you're just tuning in to us on the Foxworth Theory, our guest today is Dr. Andrea Hickson-Martin, and we are speaking on some very interesting topics. Andrea, what role should education play in creating a more inclusive society?
I'm a lifelong educator, as you stated in the beginning. I work at Bay Path University. I am director of elementary and early childhood education at that university. So basically, I am training students to be future teachers. So this is my wheelhouse, right? This is very important to me, that education play a leading role in addressing concerns around the LGBTQ community. I mean, we know that lesbian, gays, bisexuals, transgender students have historically been invisible. They've been underserved, and they've been misunderstood. Our trans students need to be given opportunities in the schools to experience similar levels of student support and safety nets as their heterosexual counterparts. The disparities around mental health counseling, academic motivation, and just overall academic performance of the LGBTQ youth is significantly lower. There's quite a disparity of those offerings between the two groups of students. So we as educators need to be committed to learning more about gender, learning not to conflate it with sexual identity. When we confuse the two, such as making, gender spaces around bathrooms, it kind of sexualizes it. It's not, if someone identifies as male, was born female, and then there's a question of what bathroom that individual is going to use, we're making it about sex. And that's what it's not what it's about. It's about how does that person identify, and let them pick the bathroom that they feel most comfortable in. And as educators, I think we need to look at the curriculum. So what is it we're teaching? Do we have representations of all diverse populations in our classrooms? That's everything: race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, unique abilities. All of that need to be presented in a classroom. Students need to see themselves represented in a classroom. We want to, something as simple as making sure that we don't have gender conforming posters in our rooms. For example, pictures of scientists are always white men. That's got to stop. We've got to make sure that we are providing women of color that are scientists. We need to make sure that books that we're reading in our English classes address all topics, not just white male perspectives. And I was a history teacher in middle school. And I worked very hard to make sure that I included works of history from all lenses, because each of us look at life through a very different lens and have a different story. But if we listen to each other's stories, we're going to find more in common than we do that is different.
Yes. And I was going to ask you about the the programs in the schools for diversity, equity, and inclusion, and you covered that. And in relation to the LGBTQ community, but I think you've touched on that. Uh, Perhaps we have come a long way in this country since 1963, but what are the current struggles
Mm.
that have not changed in the LGBTQ community?
Yeah, I'll be honest with you. Several years back, I felt really good about the community and acceptance of the LGBTQ community. But in the last few years, in politics, in social media, bills that are being proposed, and in legislation, I'm really starting to get very concerned. It really feels that we are going backwards, and we are sliding backwards at a very, very quick rate.
Mm-hmm.
I think that 2022 is already setting itself up to be the year with the most amount of anti-LGBTQ legislation across the entire United States. We know, and I have some statistical data that there's at least 7 states that are putting forward laws that are going to limit rights of transgender and non-binary kids. We know that there are 27, maybe 28 states that do not have explicit laws that protect people from discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or gender identity. So those 27 or 28 states can refuse housing, employment, public funds to people that don't that aren't covered under sexual orientation and gender identity. To me, that's really concerning. Um, I was finally just able to legally marry, and I'm happy to say I've been with my wife for 5 years legally. Um, but I have a deep fear that could be taken away depending on who sits in office. So I can't stress enough, if you're old enough to vote, get out there and vote. Vote, 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 because who we put in office will determine what rights are afforded us. And, our civil rights laws right now are being addressed, and to include sexual orientation, all of that. But it's going to take time, and it's going to take people's votes and making sure we're putting individuals in office to voice equal rights for all.
And that is what I have been saying all along to people. I don't care whether you're a Democrat, Republican, etc., but the main vote is the vote that you can do. In other words, try to get out and vote for your local, because your local
Yes.
determines the other in order to do that. I'm not political, so I won't get into that because I'm interviewing you.
No, Ginny, I support that 100%. I'm not going to get political. People can assume what my political affiliation
Right.
is, but I can just say that we need to amend the 1964 Civil Rights Act to include discrimination but, to prevent discrimination against sexual orientation and gender identity.
True. So, on that, what are some policies and practices that have worked to advance to the advancement of the LGBTQ community?
It goes right back to who you're putting in office.
That's
It does. It really does. So, these primaries, the local races that are happening within your community. It in this case, it doesn't always come from the top down. I think that we need that groundswell effort, and start putting in representatives in these offices that believe in uh, equal rights. I'm not asking for better than, more than, just equal, just equal. So we all have the same opportunities.
mhm.
And if we can do that, then we wouldn't. I don't think it will matter the party lines. Right now, there's such a division across the parties where the issues are being lost. And we need to make sure that we do our part in this democratic society to elect officials that will push for everyone working for the rights of all. We have to educate
Yes.
ourselves. We need to inform others, and we need to mobilize to kind of push back against this assault on just basic rights, the basic right to live without fear, retribution, repercussions, all of that.
Well, would you have something that you can tell our audience about the LGBTQ community that we need to know?
They're your sisters, they're your brothers, they're your mothers, your fathers. I could go on. They're in your family. Um, be their ally. I actually like being their friend. Ally sometimes makes me feel like you're in a place of privilege, right? I want to be. I want to refer to people that support the community as my friend, as my family, people that love me and accept me for who I am. I am going to say, and I'm not paid to say this, but take a look at the Human Rights Campaign. It's called the HRC. They're working very hard to push for just basic rights. And as members of the LGBT community, as members of the colored community, there's some overlap, right, of the basic rights that haven't been afforded these diverse populations. And it's time that we stop working against each other, find out what we have in common, and move the needle forward.
And I believe 100% in the fact that we all bleed alike and we forget that we all bleed alike. And so, do you feel, or what do you feel about individuals and what one can do to support the gender identity, inclusion, and intersectionality as these factors emerge in our world today?
Mhm. Yeah, as a friend, as a family, as an ally, however you want to term it, um, call it out. Call it out when you see it. I'm going to call it out right now. Black trans people are under attack at a rate that it is just alarming. I think worldwide there's been, last year, like 375 trans individuals were murdered. It's got to stop. We need to end anti-blackness. We need to end anti-transness. We need to end anti-LGBTQ. And we do that by speaking up. If you see that someone is being prevented to equal access and you have it, then speak up. You're in a better place. I recognize as a white woman, I come with a set of privileges. And you could either use that privilege for good or you could use it for bad. And when I say bad, meaning I'm going to suppress other people because I don't want them to get the privilege that I have. That's using it badly. If I use my platform as a white woman for good, then I'm going to stand up for women of color. I'm going to stand up and be there to be their friend, their advocate, their family, their ally. That can be the same when it comes to sexuality. I may be a white lesbian, but there's nothing that stops you, Eugenia, from standing up for me when you see me being discriminated against.
Well,
We've lost humanity.
yes. Well, I am known as somewhat of a radical. I was one of the people that started with visual aids, and ACT UP came out of the gallery that I developed.
Nice.
So for me, all human beings and all religions I embrace.
Yes.
And I think there's a word that is not together anymore. It's called love. And on that, I'd like to thank you. Thank you so much, Andrea, for joining us and speaking to the audience today. And I want to thank everyone for joining us today on the Foxworth Theory, which airs every Tuesday and Thursday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Thank you for joining the Foxworth Theory, and travel safely.
Thank you.